This is the Weekly Roundup on the EAC News Channel, your look back at the week that was in the Kingdom of Wonder. Very good evening to you. My name is Andrew Barnes-Roberts, and we begin on Monday, the 6th of September. As the royal government prepares for the reopening of both its educational and tourism sectors, the Delta variant of COVID-19 continues to spread, particularly in the capital. To date, 914 cases have been detected in Phnom Penh, with 24 discovered just this weekend. Cambodia now has a total of 2,647 cases of the Delta variant of COVID-19. It is twice as contagious as the Alpha variant, which is responsible for Cambodia's current second wave. Phnom Penh is the most heavily affected province, followed by Banteay Meanchey with 526 cases. Oda Meanchey has 245, Stung Treng has 119. The Delta variant has been detected in every province in the country except for Croce and Kep. Government is racing against the Delta variant by providing booster shots. More than 600,000 frontline workers and priority groups have already received their third dose. The Phnom Penh Municipal Administration started administering booster shots on Monday to city officials, their spouses, and all residents over the age of 60 who were vaccinated with AstraZeneca 4 to 6 months ago. This stage of the capital's booster shot campaign will run until the 28th of September. A 38-year-old woman is receiving treatment at the Social Welfare Center of Phnom Penh after repeating claims this weekend that she's the Prime Minister's daughter. The issue surfaced on the Prime Minister's Facebook page this weekend. He's now intervened to ensure that the woman gets the help she needs. EAC News reporter Yuri Matosko has the story.
Using the name Julie on Facebook, Puen Sampho has repeatedly claimed to be Prime Minister Hun Sen's daughter. She posted another comment to that effect this weekend in response to one of the Prime Minister's posts. And the Prime Minister clearly decided it was time the woman received some help. He replied to her comment asking for her name and her address, so that he could arrange some treatment for what he saw as a mental illness. After having received the information, the Prime Minister directed the Social Welfare Department of Phnom Penh to visit and assess the woman. Her condition has been described as moderate, and she is now receiving treatment. Her 3 children, one of whom is adopted, are in the care of social workers. For the record, Prime Minister Hun Sen and his wife, Bun Rani Hun Sen, have had 6 children, whom Kamsat died during the Khmer Rouge. Their 5 living children are Hun Manait, Hun Mana, Hun Manet, Hun Mani, and Hun Mali. They have a total of 22 grandchildren. Yuri Matosko, EAC News.
The race is on to save the world's most important forest. Sunday saw the 171st celebration of Amazon Day. The day was first celebrated back in 1850 to mark the creation of Brazil's Amazonas state, but has now become a rallying call for climate change awareness and the impact rapid deforestation in the Amazon is having. The world's top conservation body is considering whether to propose that 80% of the Amazon rainforest be declared a protected area by 2025. The International Union for the Conservation of Nature believes this is the only way to save the most important rainforest on Earth. Submitted under an emergency provision, the measure calls for a global action plan to halt what is described as rampant deforestation and the destructive extraction of precious minerals and oil. Over the past 2 decades, the Amazon has lost roughly 10,000 square kilometers every year. Thick smoke billows above the jungle on a daily basis as land is cleared for commercial agriculture and mining. But the fires are getting worse. In August, according to government data, fires were well above the historic average for a 3rd consecutive year. It's not been this bad since before President Jair Bolsonaro took office. The right-wing president has been widely criticized for driving development in the Amazon while working to weaken environmental protections. Scientists fear the rapid rate of destruction risks sabotaging global attempts to limit climate change. The Amazon is the world's largest rainforest and is seen as vital in the fight against a warming climate because of the vast amount of carbon dioxide that its plant life absorbs. More of the kingdom's schools have announced plans to reopen. The international school in Siem Reap became the first to open its doors on Monday. Koh Kong provincial authorities now say they'll follow suit on Thursday, with Priya Sihanouk planning to open on Monday for those who are due to graduate. But as EAC news reporter Reo Soko explains, it appears these provinces and schools are all jumping the gun.
There's been no formal comment from the Ministry of Education, but it has told EAC News that there's been no change to the original plan. That is for the provinces to simply gather data as to which areas have low infection rates of COVID-19 and which schools can possibly reopen. The ministry says it expects that information by the middle of September, and only then will decisions be made about which schools can reopen and where. But on Monday already, the International School of Siem Reap confirmed to EAC News that they had reopened for high school students with 2 days of face-to-face classes per week. Hours later, the Koh Kong Provincial Authority and Provincial Department of Education announced that some of their schools would reopen on Thursday. Priya Sihanouk has also decided to go it alone, reopening 5 schools next Monday. Some in Phnom Penh are also hard at work cleaning up, expecting to reopen in the next couple of weeks.
While a handful of schools reopen in the coming days, the message from the Education Ministry is clear. No decisions have been made which schools can reopen, and no decisions will be made at least the middle of the month. It wants to see data about communities and their infection rates before any school, anywhere, will get a green light to reopen. Rhea Soko, EAC News, Phnom Penh.
More quarantined foreign nationals are complaining about the standard of their stays at some of the capital's designated quarantine hotels. Foreigners are being charged a standard $10 per meal, and while some hotels are delivering decent service, others appear to be taking complete advantage. One foreign national who arrived in Cambodia last week spoke exclusively to EAC news reporter Reo Soko.
Daryl Barnum arrived from China a week ago. He initially booked at Sokha Hotel for the alternative state quarantine package, but had to cancel that after encountering problems with his flights being canceled and rescheduled. After landing at Phnom Penh International, his designated quarantine hotel was the Aria Central Hotel. He opted for an upgrade of his quarantine at a cost of $182, but says for the past week, he's been getting little more than bread and milk for breakfast. Certainly not justifying the $10 he's being charged. He says he's also being overcharged for bottled water.
Try to be somewhat responsive, but I have mentioned many times these meals are lacking. And they said they will try to improve them, and they don't. Also, it's required, a normal diet is required about 2,000 calories. This is known, and that the meals are so subpar, they're not even 1,000 calories. So in effect, we're being starved and dehydrated. We don't get enough water, and we still don't get enough foods. So I don't understand. We're being held captive, and we still cannot get anything but what we're at the mercy of the hotel.
Barnum says his family in Cambodia have tried to send him food, but the hotel does not allow deliveries. He says the hotel only allows him to order food through them at inflated prices. EAC News spoke to another traveler under quarantine at Olympia City Hotel. He also wanted to book at one of the 4 ASQ hotels, but they were all full. He has also complained about the food, but luckily for him, the hotel is allowing his family to deliver more. Both him and Barnum have expressed frustration about being locked in a hotel room for 14 days when they could be out working. Barnum has secured a job at a local school. As a first-time traveler to Cambodia, he says he's looking forward to contributing and learning more in the kingdom. His only wish right now is for a meal that justifies the $10 he's being charged.
Aria Central Hotel is just one of many receiving complaints from its quarantine guests, especially when it comes to food. EAC News contracted hotel management about Barnum's grievances. Their only comment: "We are sad to hear the complaints from our guests." Rhea Soko, EAC News, Phnom Penh.
The United Nations in Cambodia says it will continue its support for people with disabilities. It has also praised the kingdom's response to COVID-19. The UN in Cambodia released what it calls an information note on Monday, pledging its active support for the government as it works to improve the lives of some of society's most vulnerable people. The UN says people with disabilities face multiple challenges, such as inequality and discrimination in access to education, healthcare, employment, social protection, justice, and public transport. 4.9% of the Cambodian population over the age of 5 suffer with some form of disability. The UN in Cambodia says in addition to the health sector, several UN agencies are focusing on the secondary impacts of the pandemic and are contributing specific support in other areas such as social protection, education, and employment. It says it has provided technical support to the government to ensure equitable and accessible social protection programs for people with disabilities. As a result, almost 60,000 have had access to the National Cash Transfer Program during the pandemic. A further 30,000 children with disabilities will benefit from 760,000 home learning packages currently distributed to those in grades 1 and 2. Secretary-General of Cambodia's Disability Action Council, M. Chan Makara, told EAC News that he welcomes the UN statement and looks forward to continued cooperation with such a valued international partner. He says he hopes the UN will help improve the quality of life for people with disabilities, especially while the kingdom recovers from the pandemic. The Taliban has claimed victory over rebels in the northeastern valley of Panjshir, saying it is now in full control of Afghanistan. The group says it will also make an announcement soon on the formation of a new government. Members of the Taliban were filmed raising their unpopular flag in front of the gate to the Panjshir provincial governor's compound. Days of fighting have come to an end in the valley, with the Taliban promising there'll be no reprisals for the region's people. The National Resistance Front of Afghanistan, led by Panjshiri leader Ahmed Massoud, has not conceded defeat, though. Its leader has taken to social media to say he's safe and in hiding. Only at the weekend, he said he was ready for peace talks. The group now says it will continue fighting. Taliban spokesperson Zabihullah Mujahid addressed a media briefing in Kabul late on Monday. He says Massoud and former Vice President Amullah Saleh have fled to neighboring Tajikistan. Mujahid says the Taliban's focus is now on the formation of a new government and that an announcement would be made soon. He also said women were back at work in the health and education sectors. How they are back might raise some eyebrows, though. Pictures circulating on social media in the country show university classrooms divided into sections for male and female students. What happens in universities and schools across the country is being closely watched by governments around the world. Some Western countries have said aid and formal recognition of the Taliban would depend on how they run the country, including their treatment of women and girls. When they last ruled Afghanistan, girls were banned from school and women from university and work. The Taliban now says women's rights will be honored in accordance with Islamic law, and it would seem these pictures indicate exactly what they have in mind. A more pressing issue for the Taliban, though, is the state of the country's healthcare system. The WHO says hundreds of medical facilities are at risk of imminent closure because donors who provide the financing are not allowed to deal with the Taliban. The WHO's emergency director for the Eastern Mediterranean, Rick Brennan, says urgent supplies, equipment, and financing are being arranged. He says the WHO is liaising with Qatar for medical deliveries in the next week, now that Kabul's main airport has reopened for a limited number of flights. To our top story, and Cambodia has marked National Literacy Day. Due to the current COVID-19 situation, the celebration and its literacy campaign have been held online. Prime Minister Hun Sen has released a statement encouraging Cambodians to seek lifelong learning opportunities by any means. He says the royal government recently adopted the National Policy on Lifelong Learning, which aims to provide opportunities and support for those receiving an education so that the kingdom can enjoy increased levels of efficiency. EAC News reporter Reo Soko has the story.
Literacy is the foundation of lifelong learning. This year's theme for National Literacy Day: Prime Minister Hun Sen has emphasized that the government pays attention to the development of human resources by providing all young people with vocational training. He says that this is aimed at giving every young person at least one life skill. Despite Cambodia's ongoing second wave of the pandemic, the Prime Minister says he promotes the continued education of students through different forms of learning. To this end, he recently instructed the Ministry of Education to sit down with capital and provincial governors to look at which schools could be reopened in areas with low infection rates. He fears that student dropouts could increase if schools remain closed for much longer. Prime Minister Hun Sen has also encouraged students and youth organizations to be active in volunteering to teach illiterate people in their community at local centers and pagodas. He's also encouraged monks and other religious leaders to promote cultural and moral education. The Prime Minister concluded by saying he believes being literate means being able to think and make the right decisions in life, which ultimately lead to greater community development. Rhea Soko, EAC News.
The largest freshwater lake in Southeast Asia and the biggest source of food supply for Cambodians, the Tonle Sap Lake, is in crisis. It has been reported as having reached historically low water levels at the end of last month, raising concerns across the Mekong River basin. The Mekong River Commission and its partners are now deploying innovative information and communication technologies to assist governments and communities manage extreme weather conditions that are affecting the lower Mekong region. EAC News reporter Rhea Soko has more.
The Tonle Sap Lake is one of the richest inland fishing grounds in the world, but is now under threat from climate change. Fishermen living in core areas of the Tonle Sap Biosphere Reserve in Kampong Thom have long complained that fishing yields have been in decline due to low water levels in the wet season. The Mekong River Commission says on 31 August, station readings showed a water level of just 3.86 meters. That's nearly a meter lower than in 2020 and about half the normal average for this time of the year. The Commission says the lower Mekong regions remains highly vulnerable, not only to increased drought but also flooding. Earlier this year, the MRC and Korea Development Institute launched a project aimed at demonstrating how high-tech solutions can support Cambodia, Laos, Thailand, and Vietnam in minimizing the impact of weather-related disasters. Chief Executive Officer of the MRC Secretariat, Anpik Hadda, says climate change necessitates that member countries prioritize, scale up the response mechanisms, and take advantage of cutting-edge technologies to facilitate more effective action. In a workshop organized by the MRC on Monday, the policy report recommended developing map-based flood and drought monitoring systems by analyzing areas vulnerable to flood and drought. The topic is expected to come up during Thursday's 7th Greater Mekong Sub-Region Summit, which will be chaired virtually by Prime Minister Hun Sen. His office says the meeting will focusing on high-priority projects including the environment, trade, private sector investment, and agriculture. Rhea Soko, EAC News.
3 weeks after taking over Kabul and a day after securing a rebel province north of the capital, the Taliban have announced Afghanistan's new government. Its new administration has sparked protests on the streets of Kabul and has raised eyebrows in Washington. Mullah Hassan Akhund, an associate of the movement's late founder Mullah Omar, is the head of Afghanistan's new government. Mullah Abdul Ghani Baradar is to be his deputy. The makeup of the new government was announced during a news conference in Kabul late on Tuesday. Taliban spokesperson Zabihullah Mujahid said Afghanistan needs comprehensive activities and services in various fields to address the legal, economic, and social rights of the people. He says all those named are holding their positions in an acting capacity. But it's the country's new interior minister who has raised eyebrows in Washington. Sirajuddin Haqqani is on the FBI's most wanted list. He is the son of the founder of the Haqqani network, designated as a terrorist organization by the United States. There is a $10 million reward on offer for his capture, meaning the diplomatic path forward for the US and Afghanistan is complicated, to say the least. Mullah Muhammad Yaqub, the son of the late Mullah Omar, has been named as defense minister, and it's not at all clear what role will be played by Mullah Haibatullah Akhundzada, the Taliban's supreme leader. He has not been seen or heard in public since the collapse of the Western-backed government last month. Given that the Taliban have declared that Afghanistan is a new emirate, analysts believe he may be named the country's first emir. There have been no immediate reports of injuries, but the Taliban isn't taking protests lightly. It fired shots into the air to disrupt this protest on the streets of the capital. The Taliban have repeatedly sought to reassure Afghans and foreign governments that there will be no return to the brutality of their last reign 2 decades ago, marked by public executions and the barring of women and girls from public life. EAC News fully supports the royal government of Cambodia's preventative and administrative measures against COVID-19. But we need you to play your part in helping bring the 20 February community transmission event to an end. Wash your hands regularly, sanitize wherever possible. Keep an eye on your body temperature. Use the Stop COVID QR code and maintain a safe social distance. But above all, please, 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 wear a mask. Only together can we beat COVID-19. If it's happening and you need to know about it, you'll get it all right here. EAC News brings you updates and breaking news in English across all of our platforms and channels. The EAC News app, YouTube, Facebook, Telegram, Twitter, and our website www.eacnews.asia. Join me, Andrew Barnes-Roberts, and the rest of the EAC News team every day on your favorite channels. EAC News, Cambodia made clear. Prime Minister Hun Sen has chaired the 7th Greater Mekong Sub-Region Summit. Under the theme, Renewed Strength to Face the Challenges of the New Decade, the Prime Minister reaffirmed the region's commitment to addressing new challenges, ensuring centrality in regional connectivity, and propelling countries towards sustainable and inclusive development. EAC News reporter Reo Soko has our top story.
After the first Greater Mekong Summit in 2002 held in Phnom Penh, the Prime Minister said he felt honored as he once again chaired its now 7th edition. The summit was attended by his counterparts from China, Vietnam, Laos, Myanmar, and Thailand, as well as the Asian Development Bank. Prime Minister Hun Sen stressed the environmental challenges that the region is facing while battling the pandemic. He says there is a need to accelerate the implementation of the region's cooperation program and promote multilateral mechanisms to ensure a strong social and economic recovery once the pandemic is over. He also says the region will demonstrate resilience when it comes to tackling the climate emergency, the effects of which are already being seen in the region.
The pandemic has certainly hampered the development in the region, but the Prime Minister has urged Mekong leaders to fast-track the turning of the crisis into an opportunity for the development of the Mekong region as a whole. He also thanked China once again for its help in the country's fight against COVID-19, most especially the provision of vaccines, which will see Cambodia starting its new normal way before many other countries around the world. Rhea Soko, EAC News, Phnom Penh.
There's been a collective groan in the capital. The Phnom Penh Capital Administration has extended the city's COVID-19 preventative measures for a further 14 days. This is the third time the measures have been extended. By the time it gets to Friday, the 24th of September, it'll have been 6 weeks since you could buy or be served alcohol in Phnom Penh or organize a gathering of more than 15 people. While that 6 weeks will no doubt feel long, it's now more than 6 months since high-risk businesses were forced to close their doors. Bars, beer gardens, KTVs, gyms, movies and museums, not to mention schools, have all been closed since early March. There had been hope that they could reopen this week, given the fact that Phnom Penh is the most vaccinated city in the world. But with over 1,000 Delta cases and climbing, authorities are clearly concerned about a possible third wave and have kept the current preventative measures in place. The news has been met with disappointment across the capital. Entertainment businesses particularly have been hit hard by the pandemic. The already month-long ban on alcohol sales, now extended for a further 2 weeks, is putting even more pressure on business owners. EAC News reporter Yuri Matosko gauged reaction on Thursday morning.
The ongoing ban on alcohol is significantly impacting hospitality, industry, and breweries. Many of the smaller companies are wondering whether they will be able to survive until the restrictions are lifted. This morning, the government just announced the extension of the alcohol ban for 2 more weeks. I am here with Neil, a local businessman at Riverside. So Neil, what's your reaction?
Well, I'm not surprised, Yuri. It's 2 more weeks. It could be another 2 more weeks, who knows? It's disappointing as a business owner here, and I think I speak for everybody in the area. It's a little bit too much. The businesses that are losing the money, how much longer can we kick the can down the road before it affects and people have to close and more people lose their jobs, etc.? It's just, it's not good.
Can you tell me, those drinks are here since the 90 days alcohol ban?
Yeah, exactly. So we just stocked up again prior to, and again, like all the bars and restaurants, they brought in the kegs, hoping that the customers are going to come back, because they don't only just buy alcohol, they buy everything else that's in the store. So we stocked that up too, based on they're going to buy a bottle of wine, bag of crisps, etc., etc. So we buy more crisps, but they go out of date too. So it's a knock-on effect. It just continuously costs money. So
the owner of Riverside restaurant Ulala, Jack Go, says his business profits are down 80%.
So far, we have a hard time to survive. And after the extension, after 2 weeks, so we just have a hard time, and we hardly can support our workers. We have no choice, have to follow the government regulation. So that's why we cannot do anything until the restriction been taken over.
President of AmCham, Anthony Galliano, was surprised the suspensions have been extended.
That was not expected, to be honest. So we'll have to cope. It's an essential necessity for the time being, for the situation being this Delta variant, obviously, is causing some deep concern. And the third dose is being rolled out, so hopefully with the third dose rollout, there'll be less of a heightened concern about the Delta variant and the impact of that will have on the population here.
Galliano expressed hopes that things will get back to normal soon, with a safe environment for everyone to enjoy themselves in. With the extension of the ban on alcohol and high-risk businesses, owners say they continue to suffer as Cambodia fights the COVID-19 pandemic. They had been hoping it might be time to celebrate, but cheers of cheers will have to wait. Yuri Matosko, EAC News, Phnom Penh.
Well, now for a look at news making international headlines this Thursday, the 9th of September.
The state governor of Mexico's Guerrero says Tuesday's 7-magnitude quake that hit just north of the resort city of Acapulco killed only one person who was crushed by a falling post during the quake, which lasted a full minute. 150 aftershocks were reported in the hours that followed. There's been significant damage to property. The Federal Electricity Commission says 1.6 million customers have lost power. It's believed the death toll was so low because 99% of the area's earthquake alarm system loudspeakers did their job. The alarm sent millions of residents out into the streets. The quake came on the 4th anniversary of an 8.2 magnitude that ravaged southern Mexico, claiming the lives of over 100 people. An Indonesian government minister says a massive prison fire might have been caused by an electric fault. It broke out while inmates were sleeping and quickly swept through the overcrowded Tangerang prison block outside Jakarta. At least 41 inmates have been killed, including 2 foreign nationals, a South African and a Portuguese, both serving drug sentences. The prison houses more than 2,000 inmates, far exceeding its 600 capacity. One block built for 38 inmates was reportedly housing 122. Human rights organizations in the country say the criminal justice system, including significantly overcrowded prisons, need urgent reform. And a gas explosion at an apartment block near Moscow has claimed the lives of 2 people. Big holes in the outer walls of the building in Niginsk, 50 kilometers east of Moscow, show the power of the blast. 2 among the 5 people injured are children. They were injured as walls collapsed throughout 3 of the building's floors. 5 of the building's 73 apartments have been badly damaged. 173 residents have been evacuated.
After over 6 months of closure, schools in the capital are set to reopen next week. The Phnom Penh Capital Administration has decided to allow the reopening of secondary level starting on Wednesday, 15 September. But it is stressing that all schools slated for reopening must first undergo inspections. EAC News reporter Reo Soko has our top story.
Harrods International Academy in BKK was inspected by the Ministry of Education on Friday morning. It was the first on the list, already approved to reopen next week after submitting the required documents 2 days ago. But the school administration has decided to reopen the week after. School Director Felipa Bason says they are looking at Monday, the 20th of September. And while they are excited at the prospect of reopening, their priority is the safety of their children. She says the past almost 7 months have been a challenge for their teachers, parents, and children, but a challenge that encouraged everyone to adapt.
Very. But it's also been a wonderful journey too. We have strengthened our homeschool partnerships. We've built trust with our parents, teachers, and staff have vastly increased their professional and personal capacities and skills. This week we have had all of the ministry visits for reopening, but we are also preparing for our Council of International Schools, CIS, visits and inspections as well to become a member school for them. So we have external accreditation for our quality of our school to an international standard. So it has been a very challenging time. But the best thing about this last 7 months is how our children have learned. They have become more confident, self-reliant, and they are more in charge of their own learning journeys.
EAC News also spoke to some high school students in the capital who say they're excited to get back to class.
I am so happy to hear about the reopening because it was hard for me to stay focused studying at home for a long period of time.
I'm also very happy after learning we are going back to school. I'm so excited and hope to see my classmates soon.
The date agreed by the Ministry of Education and Phnom Penh Capital Administration, Wednesday, 15 September, is just a starting point when both public and private secondary schools can reopen. EAC News did contact the ministry, but it says it has no further comment to make for now.
The school administrator says they've been surprised how fast things run. Although they have been preparing their staff, proper hygiene, and safety measures against COVID-19 for months. They can now finally see the light, with schools starting to reopen next week. Reyes Soko, EAC News, Phnom Penh.
Prime Minister Hun Sen has delivered a video address to mark the opening of the 18th China-ASEAN Expo. This year's theme is about sharing opportunities to build a common future. In his address, the Prime Minister focused on the pandemic, China-ASEAN relations, and the Kingdom's efforts to boost trade and investment. The Expo forms part of the China-ASEAN Dialogue Partnership, which marks its 30th anniversary this year. The Prime Minister says the past 30 years have become a solid foundation for ASEAN and China to pave the way in creating new opportunities to achieve a prosperous and environmentally friendly future. He says the fight against the pandemic requires solidarity, trust, consideration, and collective action with respect for international law and sovereignty. He says China and ASEAN must continue to promote cooperation, especially in finance and trade, in order to accelerate a post-pandemic recovery. The Prime Minister remarked how he'd like to see a greater opening up of markets and free trade flows in the wake of COVID-19 to facilitate investment flows into the kingdom as well as to boost exports. Despite being a resource-scarce country, he says Cambodia is committed to turning the pandemic into an opportunity for deeper reform to build a stronger economy that is more resilient. Applauding the country for its vaccination rollout and once again thanking China for its assistance, the Prime Minister says he's hopeful the high rates of vaccination in the kingdom mean the country could soon gradually launch a full range of socio-economic activities in the near future, hinting that Cambodia's new normal and the reopening of its international borders aren't all that far away. Thousands of people will gather in New York City, Washington, D.C., Arlington, Virginia, and Shanksville, Pennsylvania on Saturday to mark the 20th anniversary of the 9/11 attacks. Almost 3,000 people were killed when hijacked passenger jets were flown into New York's Twin Towers and the Pentagon. A third was brought down in a field in Pennsylvania by its passengers. Its intended target had been Capitol Hill. It was almost 90 minutes of terror that has changed the world we live in. Tuesday, the 11th of September 2001. The North Tower of New York's World Trade Center already ablaze in what most people thought had been a terrible accident. American Airlines Flight 11 had flown into it at 8:46 in the morning local time. All thoughts of an accident evaporated at 9:03 a.m. when the South Tower was hit by United Airlines Flight 175. It was then that the world knew the United States was under attack. 34 minutes later, at 9:37 a.m., American Airlines Flight 77 hit the Pentagon. At 9:59 a.m., back in New York, the unthinkable. The South Tower collapsed. A few minutes later, reports of the crash of United Airlines Flight 93 in a field outside the town of Shanksville, Pennsylvania. Over in New York, at 10:28 a.m., the unimaginable. The North Tower collapsed as well. It was then that everyone watching knew the world had changed. A subsequent investigation revealed that United Flight 93 had been downed by passengers on hearing the hijackers' intended target had been the U.S. Capitol. Those in the plane all knew what had happened in New York and Virginia. Osama bin Laden, the leader of the al-Qaeda network, was quick to claim responsibility. He was being harbored in Afghanistan by the Taliban. While the FBI launched its investigation into what would become called a spectacular failure of imagination on the part of U.S. security agencies, the White House of George W. Bush launched its war on terror. A US-led coalition stormed into Afghanistan with the phrase collateral damage quickly entering everyday English. Thousands of men, women, and children killed, all in the relentless pursuit of one man. But just 3 months later, the then US president made this statement.
Thanks to our military and our allies and the brave fighters of Afghanistan, the Taliban regime is coming to an end.
He was right, at least at the time. But Osama bin Laden would continue to haunt the US for a further 10 years. It wasn't until April 2011 that he was killed in a raid by US Marines in the small Pakistan town of Abbottabad while an anxious White House watched. Back in Afghanistan, there was a US-backed democratically elected government, and signs life was settling down once again. But thousands of foreign troops were keeping the peace. Questions started to be asked about just how much longer they'd need to be there. Then President Barack Obama dropped in to visit troops at Bagram Air Base, pledging to end the war.
For many of you, this will be your last tour in Afghanistan. And by the end of this year, the transition will be complete, and Afghans will take full responsibility for their security, and our combat mission will be over. America's war in Afghanistan will come to a responsible end.
But it didn't. A full 7 years later, almost 20 years after the 9/11 attacks, a shambolic US troop withdrawal put the Taliban right back where they were. This time, though, they're promising to rebuild, as well as respect human rights within the framework of Islamic law. The world watches and waits to see if they keep those promises. While 20 years of war effectively achieved very little, the 9/11 attacks did indeed change the world, with a rise in terror groups and a shift in the global balance of power. But most fundamentally, it changed the way we travel. Airports have since adopted their own new normal, with pre-flight screening and seemingly never-ending security checks, with passengers needing to remove belts and shoes, wristwatches, and mobile phones. 20 years on, we all still remember where we were the moment we heard about what was happening in New York that September morning. It is a day the world will simply never forget. EAC News fully supports the Royal Government of Cambodia's preventative and administrative measures against COVID-19. But we need you to play your part in helping bring the 20 February community transmission event to an end. Wash your hands regularly, sanitize wherever possible. Keep an eye on your body temperature. Use the Stop COVID QR code and maintain a safe social distance. But above all, please, 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 wear a mask. Only together can we beat COVID-19. If it's happening and you need to know about it, you'll get it all right here. EAC News brings you updates and breaking news in English across all of our platforms and channels. The EAC News app, YouTube, Facebook, Telegram, Twitter, and our website www.eacnews.asia. Join me, Andrew Barnes-Roberts, and the rest of the EAC News team every day on your favorite channels. EAC News, Cambodia made clear. One of the best Paralympic Games anyone remembers came to an end in Tokyo on Sunday night. 12 days of competition by athletes from around the world have seen world records smashed and new personal bests set. The Games also passed off without a major COVID outbreak, with Japan successfully hosting back-to-back events inside a well-managed bubble. Once again, television rights being what they are for the Olympics and Paralympics, this is all we can show you of the closing ceremony. The fireworks lit up the Tokyo night sky with crowds of spectators whipping out their phones to capture the moment. No spectators inside that stadium, with the Paralympics, like the Olympics, being held in a city under a pandemic state of emergency. But the International Paralympic Committee has hailed the Games as historic and fantastic. The closing ceremony was described as an opening to a bright and inclusive future. The next Paralympic Games will take place in Paris in 2024. Argentina's football squad are back home in training after Sunday night's fiasco in Brazil. Their World Cup qualifier was called off 5 minutes into the match because 4 of their players had lied on their immigration forms to dodge quarantine. No date has been set for a rematch, but Argentina's next scheduled fixture is against Bolivia on Thursday. Aston Villa duo Emiliano Martinez and Emi Buendia, as well as Spurs duo Cristian Romero and Giovanni Lo Celso, have all been accused of quarantine dodging. Brazil's federal police say they have opened a formal inquiry. The country's health regulator, Anvisa, says Brazilian rules clearly state that travelers who have been in the UK, South Africa, or India during the previous 14 days are forbidden from entering the country unless they are Brazilian citizens or have permanent residency. In response, the Argentine Football Association says Martinez and Buendia have been released from the national team. They will not take part in Thursday's qualifier against Bolivia. It has also released Lo Celso and Romero, saying they are out of the game and can return to their club in the UK. FIFA has yet to announce a new date for the Argentina-Brazil qualifier. Belarus hosts Belgium in Wednesday night's World Cup qualifier, but the match isn't being played in Belarus. It's actually being hosted by the Russian city of Kazan, with sanctions having been imposed on Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko. It's effectively an away game for both teams, who spent Tuesday in training. Belarus have it all to play for, sitting in 5th spot in the qualifying group with just 3 points. They lost their most recent match against Wales on Sunday. Belgium are sitting comfortably on top, a full 6 points clear, having romped home to a 3-0 win over Czech Republic at the weekend.
3 games in 7 days, so we prepared always a larger squad. We always thought that the players that they were going to be involved, I would say starting the first 2 games would be very difficult to be involved in the third. And we've been through every single individual, and we got a very fresh squad for tomorrow, I'm happy to say.
Belgium look all but certain to qualify for Qatar 2022, with the top 4 teams in each group automatically qualifying for next year's World Cup. Brazil's national football coach has defended health officials over Sunday night's fiasco in Sao Paulo. They stormed onto the pitch and stopped play barely 5 minutes after kickoff. Tite says they did the right thing, with it having emerged that 4 of Argentina's players lied to avoid quarantine.
A decisão justa.
The coach addressed a media briefing on the sidelines of a training session late on Wednesday. He says it was the right decision to respect the law and that the health of the people must be a priority. The disruption of the qualifier is now the subject of a FIFA investigation. Brazilian players are ploughing on, though, hard at work training for Thursday night's qualifier against Peru. Peru come into the match after having beaten Venezuela 1-0 on Sunday night. Fans in Buenos Aires were excited to see their favorite player Lionel Messi back home for Thursday night's World Cup qualifier, and they weren't disappointed. Argentina notched up a 3-0 win over Bolivia, and Messi became South America's top goal scorer of all time.
The night belonged to Messi at the Monumental de Nunes Stadium in Buenos Aires. Fans were excited to watch Argentina's first home game since the pandemic and were expecting to see Lionel Messi put in a brilliant performance. But even he couldn't have expected it would have been so brilliant. Just 14 minutes after kick, he opened the game with his first goal,
scored his second in the 64th minute, and then bagged a hat-trick with just 2 minutes left on the clock. The 3 goals have the Argentinian captain 2 more goals than the mighty Pelé on the South American scoring chart. Argentina remain in second place behind Brazil in the 10th team qualifying group. The top 4 teams will automatically qualify for Qatar 2022.
And finally, 2 Cambodian films have been screened at this year's 78th Venice Film Festival. 600 movies from 75 countries were sent in for consideration, but only 92 were selected. The Cambodian films are White Building, directed by Kavik Nying, and the country's first ever sci-fi movie, Karmalink, directed by Jack Wachtel. Both directors managed to find some time in their busy premiere agenda in Venice to talk to EAC News reporter Yuri Matosko.
White Building has already been pre-selected to represent Cambodia at the Oscars in the Best Foreign Language Film category. It's set in what was one of the most well-known housing projects in Phnom Penh, built in the 1960s by Khmer and Russian architects Luban Hap and Vladimir Bodiansky. It was the country's first urban lifestyle complex for lower and middle-class Cambodians, when the capital's population boomed from 400,000 to 1 million inhabitants. By 2014, however, the government had made the decision that the dilapidated buildings would be demolished. The movie is set at that time. It tells the story of 20-year-old Samnam facing the prospect of gentrification, with his lifelong home set to be demolished. Pressure from family and neighbors also arise. The director himself, Kavik Nying, grew up in the building. We asked him how he felt knowing that the film will represent the country at the Academy Awards.
Yeah, for me, I'm very, very thrilled and excited that my first feature film has been chosen, for Cambodian Oscar, and I think it's very, an honor for me and for the team. And yeah, it for me it's touching and so meaningful, and also to have the film premiere in Venice, and to be the first Cambodian to have in the official selection, I feel so proud.
The second Khmer movie screened at Venice is Karmalink, set in a dystopian futuristic Phnom Penh with Buddhist beliefs. The main character is a 13-year-old boy called Leng Heng, who has vivid dreams of his past lives. Together with his friends, he finds a technological tool that could help him to deeper into one of those dreams. California director Jack Wachtel told EAC News that in an unexpected way, the pandemic helped the production of the film's visual effects.
We kind of got lucky with the pandemic hit when we were starting the visual effects, and that allowed us to kind of take a deep breath and spend a lot more time on the visual effects than we were originally planning to. The visual effects took a long time for this movie. We put a lot of work into it. We did a lot of iterating.
He says he's excited for the Cambodian public to see the film.
It feels really special when you get to see it on the big screen because of the effects, we did a really strong work on the sound design. So you feel you can feel the bass and you can feel it surrounding you in the theater, and you can see these skyscrapers, you can see the augmented reality on the big screen. That's something that I think is going to be really exciting.
The Venice Festival ends on Saturday. With movie houses closed in Cambodia, it's not known when the 2 movies will be released in the kingdom. Yuri Matosko, EAC News.
All right, let's take a look at tomorrow's weather. Thank you for watching the Weekly Roundup here on the EAC News channel. More from the EAC News team in the Daily Roundup, Monday nights at 8. I will see you then.